Hello and welcome to our channel. With this Explained in 10 series, we're aiming to explain development concepts in about 10 minutes. So let's get into it and talk about web development in 2020. Before we dive into tools and fundamentals, let's talk about why you'd want to learn web development and what you can do with it. You could get a job as a developer and work for a company. If that's the case for you, you might want to check out sites like LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Indeed, or any other job portals. That will give you a better idea of the kind of roles companies are looking for in your location. You can also look at pay scale to look at what the average pay looks like for a particular role, skill level, and location. You could freelance for clients or work on contract basis for companies. You could start your own web or app development business to create products for a client. You might also do this to create your own product or service for which you may or may not already have an idea. Or you might just be looking to learn something new, which is always amazing. All right, so let's talk about tools you need to become a web developer. So, first and foremost, you definitely need a computer. The operating system could be Mac, Linux, or Windows. It really boils down to your personal preference. I've used all of them at one point or another for development, and they all work. Just ensure that your RAM is at least 8 gigabytes, if not higher, and that you pick a good processor. You'll need a terminal, so Bash on Linux, you could use iTerm or Zeesh on Mac. Don't use the default command prompt on Windows, it really isn't fun to work with. You can use maybe Git Bash. I used to use it because I could run Bash commands on Windows. You could also use Hyper, which is a terminal based in JavaScript. It looks really nice and is highly customizable, but unfortunately it kept crashing for me. I've also used Commander on Windows, which is really nice, and you can set up scripts on there to have it open in a certain way, and it's really nice. You'll need a text editor. This is also something of a personal preference. There are so many text editors out there. There's VS Code, Atom, Brackets, Sublime Text, and many others. There's also Vim, which is from a time where GUIs weren't in, so text mode was your only option. There's a steep learning curve with it, but once you get the hang of it, it does improve your productivity quite a bit. If you are just starting out, I'd recommend VS Code. It's free and open source, and there's tons of great extensions available. Design tools are not an absolute requirement if you're in web development, but if you do want to become a web designer or you're more inclined to design or you're a visual thinker, you might want to check out Adobe XD, which is Experience Design. It's a really nice tool for UI UX work, and I find it quite intuitive to use. You can also check out Figma, which has become a popular choice as a design tool now. Let's talk about fundamentals. You'll need to learn some basic terminal commands. Now, I know the terminal might look daunting at first, but trust me, it makes your life so much easier later on. Git Basics. Git is a version control system. You can read up about it. It has been used by every other company that I've personally come across. And it's basically a way to manage your code, to keep versions of your code, use branches and tools like GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket to collaborate with other developers. You should generally have an idea of how the internet works. You need to know what the difference is between a website, a web app, a progressive web app, or a PWA, and what native hybrid mobile apps are. You need to know what open source means and what different software licenses exist. I'm not going to go through everything on this list, but we've added links in the description below, so do check them out. Once you start learning a programming language, it's very important that you pay attention to your data structures and algorithms. When you search for developer roles on job sites, these three terms show up quite often. So front-end, back-end, and full stack. Usually they are appended with developer or engineer. So front-end developer or back-end engineer. Sometimes it's a generic software or web developer role. There's also a UI developer or UX developer. Now, what do these terms actually mean? So in a client-server architecture, basically when you visit a website from a client machine on a browser like Chrome or Firefox, the client sends a request to the server. The server then responds back with a response. And that's when you see your data being displayed on the browser on the client side. So now everything that's happening on the front end, which is what the user sees, is what the front-end developers code. It's concerned with how the website looks and functions. Backend developers are the ones working on the server side of things, making sure the business logic is implemented and the users are authenticated and authorized, among many other things that they do. Full stack developers are ones who kind of do both and are responsible for creating both sides of an application. Now, it's nice to specialize in one area, either front end or back end, because they're both really vast fields on their own. There's tons and tons of tools and frameworks out there that you can learn. Full stack developers handle like multiple things at once, but the good thing about being a full stack developer is that in the long term it can be really helpful to get you a job as a tech lead of a team or a project, because you'll end up with a wide range of knowledge and experience. As a front-end developer, here's some things that you should know. Also, just a note before we get into this, that this is not meant to be a complete guide. There's a lot of things missing in this list. It's just meant to serve as a starting point. At the core of it, you'll need to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML being the markup language, CSS being the cascading style sheets, and JavaScript is the programming language. Together, these three make up the building blocks of the web, and this is something that a front-end developer absolutely has to know. Core CSS concepts like flexbox and grids and layouts for responsive web design are essential to know. It's good to know some CSS preprocessors like Sass or Less, which, if you know CSS, are really easy to pick up. Frameworks and libraries like React, Vue, Angular. I'd recommend learning React first and then exploring Vue. React has a good community support and is being used by more and more companies and developers for projects. And it has really picked up in popularity in the web development community. So I highly recommend learning React first and then checking out Vue. Angular, I'd say, is not commonly used as much anymore. You'll also need to know some build tools, so like Webpack, what Webpack and NPM scripts are. If you don't know what Jamstack is, I highly suggest you check it out too. Gatsby, Jekyll, Next are some of the platforms. You can deploy it with Netlify and it's super convenient, and the sites that you end up with are really performant. A basic idea of what you'll be doing as a front-end developer on a day-to-day basis would be everything on the user interface that the user sees and interacts with. So not the design itself, the design is created by a designer, but everything which includes like forms or menu bars, icons, layouts, writing responsive CSS. Accessibility is something front-end developers need to consider. Client-side forms and input validation, creating reusable UI components with JavaScript and CSS, especially with frameworks, because things repeat in many different areas and you need to be thinking about what you're creating and how to make it reusable. Also, maybe a way to make requests to API, to an API or the backend. Browser compatibility and device compatibility is another major thing that front-end developers do. And also maybe PWA features. PWA is progressive web apps, features like offline capabilities or push notifications. Backend developers. So I'd recommend learning Node.js, which is a free and open source server environment. It uses JavaScript, which is the programming language. Golang is an open source programming language that has gained popularity. It's syntactically similar to the programming language C. Python is also a really great language to learn and know. It's used in data science also, so if you're thinking of going down that road, that would be a good choice. You'll be using one of these frameworks like Express with Node, or Django or Flask with Python, or Laravel with PHP. Pick one. You don't need to know all of them. Generally, it's not easy to know all of them either. So pick one and see how you progress with it. You'll also be working with databases and will need to know query languages. Some of the databases are Postgres, Redis, and Mongo. There are many, many more. There's also MySQL, SQL Server. Now, you don't need to know all databases, but you should know what the difference is between SQL and NoSQL databases and what considerations to make and what limitations are there. Other things you should know about as a backend developer would be how to create RESTful APIs. GraphQL is good to know for actually front-end and backend developers. Authentication and authorization, WebSockets and real-time connections and ORMs. A basic idea of what you'll be doing as a backend developer is working on the business logic and calculations, user authentication and authorization, validating data to make sure that the type of data being passed from the front end is valid for type and content safety. Database access and CRUD operations. CRUD is create, update, and delete operations. As a full stack developer, you'll be responsible for both sides, and depending on the company or the project, you'll be working through different languages and frameworks. It might also really be worthwhile to check out how teams work in companies, what agile methodologies are, and what sprint planning and stand-up actually means. Thanks for watching Explained in 10. You can subscribe to the V3 Academy channel to stay updated as we cover some more core concepts of web development. If you want to know about something specific, let us know in the comments below. Stay tuned and stay safe.